All right,
I'm just grabbing my
back
pen.
here with
Okay.
Sass and Bridget, and I'm excited to be talking with them again because it always gets juicy. We kind of have an idea of where we want to start our conversations, and then they just flow. And so today I want to start our conversation thinking about, I've been thinking about the idea of mentoring because I'm starting to think about that personally as something I may want to do. And and when we were all getting together and sort of talking about our backgrounds, I was sort of just making a distinction between the three of us. And I was saying Sass has sort of got this academic background, and Bridget has this very businessy, she knows the real business marketing end of things. And then I kind of thought, what's my distinction? And Sass said to me, well, you're somebody who has gone the mentoring path, meaning I have two very, very strong mentors, and I really credit the fact that I've had those two mentors for the length of my coaching career as fundamental to my success as a coach. And the fact that my practice has been going for as long as it has is due to the fact that I've had these two wonderful teachers in my life. So we're going to talk a little bit about that today. And every morning I live near an estuary, and every morning I start my day with a little walk down at the estuary and talk about a mentor. The estuary has been a wonderful mentor to me too. And I started thinking about ecosystems. And if you think of your coaching practice as an estuary, as an ecosystem, which is, according to the sign that's up down at my estuary, it's the richest ecosystem in the world, the estuary. So there's lots of streams flowing into the estuary, and then it's meeting up with this beautiful ocean, and it's just this really rich place. And I started thinking, what if you think of your coaching practice as an ecosystem, and what are you downstream of? What are you downstream of is kind of this interesting question. And then it came to me this kind of contrast, the ecosystem, which is like what all are the things that are flowing into your practice versus what we have been kind of talking about, which I've decided to call the ego system, which is
Mm.
the coach influencers and the pyramid schemes and the kind of where it's about one person's kind of ego being very prominent. So that's kind of the contrast that I kind of thought about. It's like, what is it like to have an ecosystem versus being um, sort of sort of in throes to somebody's ecosystem. I
Mm.
hope that's coming across the distinction in the audio that it's eco as in ECO versus ego, EGO. And so that's kind of where I started my thinking. And then I started just really ruminating on all of the ways, not just my two main mentors who have definitely been the biggest influences on me, but other ways that I have been mentored over the years in this practice. And many of my people I consider mentors don't even know I exist, right? So there's that piece of it too. And like I was just thinking how I have this picture. One of the things I did early on in my coaching career was to sort of sit down and think about this. And I used to have behind me, and now it's in another wall in my office, but I used to have behind me, this is one of my favorite pictures. This is Marion Woodman and Carol Gilligan. And I took this as a screenshot off of my computer and printed it because they were both speaking at an event. It's the only time I think they've ever been together, but they're just two powerful women. Carol Gilligan is a very renowned developmental psychologist. Marion Woodman is a very renowned depth psychologist, and they bring that depth and development. So I sort of always thought of them as kind of being behind me, like feeding into my practice, right? And so that's another sort of little example of, so I've got my two in-person people I see in person, live connection mentors, but then we've got all these kind of mentors that don't even know there are mentors. They're kind of a little bit more subtle, but still very, very significant impact on us. So that's our little segue in. And then I would love to hear from you, Sass and Bridget, about, what that sparked for you or your own experience or what you're downstream of, let's say.
Mm. I love this idea. I'm thinking about each morning at the moment, I'm taking Bodhi for a walk along a beach, and I collect shells. I've got a big glass jar that I'm determined to fill up with little shells that I collect on our beach walks each day. And I think a lot about like what I collect, like what I kind of
Mm.
pull in, and how the eclectic nature of this. I feel like I've kind of built a little nest, and I've just like pulled in all the bits and pieces that I love, like, some feathers and some sparkly things and some, books, of course. But yeah, I really resonate with the idea of having mentors that wouldn't know that I exist, but have deeply influenced my work, as well as the people that I choose to surround myself with and I want to have conversations with and I learn from. And some of those, well, one or two of those I pay for, but mostly there isn't a cash exchange. It's very much like a very symbiotic kind of a natural organic process where, oh, I kind of like you, could we have a chat, I like what you're saying there, and then something gets created in those conversations that fills me up and I get another little thing I can add into my nest. And my hope is that when I'm with clients, they also get a kind of abstracted benefit of that, where they get to kind of go, oh, what you got in your nest? Like, let's see what I resonate with. And I really have always loved the generative nature of the kinds of conversations and the ideas. The sharing of ideas for me is just catnip. It's my love language. It's
Mhm.
everything. And yeah, it feels so much more rich in comparison to here's a formula, here's a step process, here's a whatever that might have worked for one person in that one time, and then they monetize it, and that to me feels quite hollow and a bit dry, whereas the ecosystem feels moist and rich and there's life there, and also there's unexpected things that happen when different elements meet that may not have been able to be predicted. That's that spark of resonance and creative thought to me is that, I mean, that's the stuff of life for me. Yeah.
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 Yeah. That was a very NPR moment for us all. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
I heard this other podcast and this guy said, well, we're not going to sit here weaving daisies in each other's hair the whole time. And I thought that was such
Oh,
a
that
good
sounds
way.
amazing.
Yeah. Why not?
Yeah.
Well, I think
Dude, you're
that
missing out.
there can be a little too much of that sometimes, though.
Right.
Yeah.
No,
Yeah.
totally. Well, it's funny you bring up ecosystems because when I work with, coaches or small business owners, I talk a lot about their ecosystem, because I just think
Oh,
that is for all the reasons that you said, it's more alive, it's more organic, it's something that you tend to and that has its own life, but you're part of it. And it's not necessarily a formula. You can use different elements to help support your ecosystem. So for all those reasons, I really I resonate with that idea, and I love the contrast with an ecosystem. And what I was thinking about in terms of mentorship and where we get support, I had a lot of thoughts, and I I was thinking about how early days that I just really put people on pedestals. I would find a coach or somebody and just elevate them. And if I thought they were cool, and in hindsight, I didn't have a lot of good discernment. I could really get swept away by somebody's personality, and I think that was because I didn't have enough of my own esteem to, and also I was younger. I didn't have a lot of
yeah.
experience. I think
Mm.
discernment is hard won and comes with age. And
Mm.
so I just remember, like, oh, coach is so amazing and she really has it all together. And I even wrote an essay years and years ago called Pedestal Syndrome, because I realized that I was elevating people who had not necessarily earned that from me. And I think part of my mentorship story, I resonated with, I take inspiration. I actually, like you two, like to really mix it up and seek inspiration from a bunch of different sources. And there's actually a story that I want to tell. If anybody's looking on YouTube, there's a picture behind me of Mary Poppins, which actually, well, I'll tell that really quickly. And then I think part of my mentorship story is also a story of feeling betrayed and disillusioned. And so I want to touch on that. But first, Mary Poppins. So actually, when I worked with Lianne, wow, I was somehow Mary Poppins entered the conversations. We were talking about my business and what I wanted to create. And somehow, I don't remember exactly how, but Mary Poppins entered the conversation. And instead of just letting it pass by, because Lianne, I think you're really good at metaphor and recognizing when archetypal figures are making an appearance. And you said, no, wait a minute. I think there's something here for you. And you asked me to tell you about Mary Poppins. And I said, well, I had just seen the movies or something, and it really spoke to me in a deep way. I mean, by the way, go watch Mary Poppins. There's a lot there. And I said, I love how she just kind of drops into this world. She's like totally conventionally dressed. She's floating through the air with an umbrella, but it's like no big deal. It's business as usual. She drops into this family. She quickly assesses what's going on. And then through magical and mundane means, they're getting their shit together, right? So they're making their beds, they're having a spoonful of sugar, like all this, kind of fun stuff. But then there's also like a lot of deeper stuff going on within the family dynamic, and the father, like it's deep, and she's working with the whole thing, and then no problem. We're going to jump into the sidewalk. We're going to go into the psychedelic cartoon world. Mary's just rolling with that. She's singing, she's dancing, back into the material world. And then things start to resolve and she pieces out. Her work here is done, but always with this also this love and affection. And so that really actually has now become a fundamental core principle of how I coach. So to me, that's a living example of the way that, mentorship has worked for me. Mentorship at its healthiest for me is when I've sought out these sort of disparate folks that have different perspectives, because I want to be surprised. I kind of want to be shaken up. It's like, come at me from left field and shake up my worldview a little bit and see what settles as a result of that. So there's that piece of it that I think is really healthy. And then there's this other piece where when I put people on the pedestals, who was it? It was Elizabeth Gilbert said, never meet your heroes. And I've just so found that to be true. And because people are fallible humans, and I actually really love that about humans. And what I really struggle with is when people pretend like they're not fallible humans, and that really pisses me off. So anyway, I've had this mixed bag with mentorship where I have felt betrayed, and I have had mentors betray me and act really viciously, and that affected my ability to trust people for a long time. And so I think I kind of went to, another thing we say in this house is put the teaching on the pedestal, not the teacher.
Yes.
And I think that's a really important guidepost. It doesn't matter how great that person is. You're going to do better if you elevate the teaching instead of the teacher. So Yeah, so it's been kind of a journey for me. This is an interesting conversation because I think I shied away from mentorship for a long time.
Yeah.
Well, I think you touched on some really important things there, Bridget. First, yeah, both of my mentors, my like close mentors, I don't agree with everything they say. And that's to me like one of the things you should kind of look for. If you find yourself like so in sync with somebody that you're taking everything that they say and you're
Yeah.
questioning yourself instead of questioning them at times when you come up against some friction, that to me is a sign that you're maybe in somebody's ecosystem and not in your own ecosystem. And so that's important, I think, to sort of say like, yeah, put like you're learning from them. You're not trying to be them, and you don't have to like agree with everything that they necessarily teach you. Like, and in fact, those places of friction are good because that's where you see where your own sense of comes up and that gets polished. That friction is meant to polish your own ideas and your own philosophies. But then I think the other thing you said that's also really important is like, I don't know if you call it mentorship, but the sort of like that experience is our mentor too. We might say, right? We might say like, yeah, so
Yes.
you have these experiences that also polish you, that sharpen you, that give you a deeper understanding. And so it's like what experiences have been strong mentorship experiences without necessarily a, a teacher being the kind of lead of that.
It's
Yeah.
like
And
life is the ultimate teacher, right?
well, I love that mentor actually comes from it's the name that the goddess Aphrodite. Is it
Mm.
Aphrodite? Is it Aphrodite? Do I have that right, Sass?
It
Yeah.
is, yes. Yeah.
Yeah, mentor is the name that the goddess Aphrodite took when she came down to like help somebody in one of the Greek in the Odyssey, maybe, or something like that. So it's like the mentor is the goddess in disguise, the divine energy in disguise. So it's kind of like if you see it that way, if you take that broader view, what has mentored me? What has been the divine energy in disguise helping me find my way?
I love that we're also talking about this as in experiences that can be quite uncomfortable. It can be jarring when you first realize this person who is I see as my teacher, as I maybe have put on a little pedestal, perhaps, maybe not a very high one, but someone I really respect and admire, and I'm finding myself disagreeing with them. That can be quite jarring, and you to have the courage to say, I don't know about this. If you have the opportunity to discuss it, it can be gold to have that. And also those experiences you were talking about, Bridget, where you're really disappointed, hurt, betrayed by experiences, by people that didn't meet the need, the expectation, the stated aim. I think I know for me that my growth, the kind of biggest growth has often been when it's been really shit for a while and I haven't really
Yeah.
known what was maybe going on, and then I have the work of not judging myself too harshly for not seeing something that was happening and making sense of those dynamics when something's off has been a really great teacher for me.
Yeah, I think disillusionment is a sign of growth in a way,
Yeah.
because you are beginning to split from whatever the orthodoxy is. And so I think when that first happens, it's a big disillusionment. It's a break. And then I think as you begin to recognize like, oh, this isn't, and you mature, within yourself, you begin to realize, oh, I'm just coming up with my own ideas here. This doesn't necessarily have to be a break. But I also think that's a contrast that we can point to between the ego system and the ecosystem. Because if you're in an ecosystem and you have a mentor and you say, hey, I am not able to really square what you're saying here, and you start to have a conversation. If you're in an ecosystem, that person will have that conversation with you and it'll be rich, like you said. If you're in an ecosystem, that person's going to shut you down, and maybe even more than shut you down, start messing with your psychology to to enforce their position in the ecosystem. So I think that's important to understand as well, is if somebody starts, because that's a problem too, is people in positions of authority will play mind games with you. But if you have enough of your own resourcing, if you have other people that you can speak to and talk with about it, then you can see like that is not you, that's them.
Yeah. And that's, you want to be full of yourself in the best possible way so that you can hold yourself in the presence of someone like that, for sure. Yeah. This is sort of a little sidetrack, but do you guys mind if I take a tiny little sidetrack? I wanted to say I
Naturally, you
loved your
should.
story about Mary Poppins, Bridget, but I think I just want to share a little something that when you were telling that whole story, I had no recollection of that.
Right.
And I want to share that because I think this is something that it's also good to know that's not maybe exactly related to our topic, but like that's how good coaching can be, is like
Yeah.
your ego is kind of out of the way. I don't think to myself, oh, I did that magical thing that helped Bridget. Like I thought I was like, oh yeah, I have this memory of Bridget really liking Mary Poppins. That's it. That's all I remember. And I don't feel like, but so that's where, the good coaching is too. Good coaching happens between two people. And it isn't necessarily one person doing this magical thing. It's like, and so for me, it was kind of like if I said all those things and like that's the vessel, like that's just kind of the energy that's coming through the two of us together. And I just wanted to say that because I thought that was a good example how I didn't remember any of that.
Oh, I know people will come to me and go, oh, when you said this or that, and I
Yeah.
so often don't remember
Yeah.
because I feel that too. We're co-creating in the moment, and
Yeah.
I
And I
am
think that's a great
tuned into
example
them. Yeah.
of being in an ecosystem versus being in and that's where I think a lot of new coaches get really stuck, is they're in that ego place where it's like, I've got to make something happen here. Right.
Yes.
And that's, I think, if you can, the other benefit of seeing your coaching as part of an ecosystem is that it kind of takes the responsibility and the heaviness off of you, right? It's like, oh, this is just what flows between people when we're in a good
That's such
space.
a great point, because you heard the reference to Mary Poppins. It pinged for you in some way. And, because you understand about archetype and metaphor, you just went with that. It wasn't, and you didn't have to be right or wrong. I could have said, Mary Poppins doesn't matter to me. I
Right.
actually think I said that at first, and you even prompted like, well, let's explore a little bit more. But then after that, if I would have said, no, I don't think it's relevant, we would have just moved on. It's not like you have to impress upon me this particular point, but something in it is activating you in a way that you can feel like it's an avenue to explore. And I think that's the magic that happens when, like you said, when you can get out of the ego and just be with what's happening, you'll be like, oh, that's interesting, because you're
Yeah.
interested in it and you follow
Right.
it.
Right. And so that's, so the ecosystem is like, what am I downstream of? And then also like what then flows through me,
Yeah.
right? And so
Beautiful.
then it
Yeah.
becomes this really dynamic thing. So it's, yeah, what am I downstream of? And then what does that allow to flow through me? Yeah. Okay. That just struck me and I
I
wanted to like,
can I build on that a little, because you're reminding me of a PhD thesis that I read, and I love the resonance here in that this writer was talking about a coaching session from the perspective of a flow state. Do we access a flow state? Because coaches will often not be able to recall what they've said. And this writer was exploring that. And I was really into that. And I loved that he used the metaphor of, in kind of ancient Greece, there was this idea of chronos and kairos, the different kinds of time. That chronos is quite chronological, and it's sort of step by step, it's linear. And kairos is much more of a swirling, flowy energy. And in my mind, I'm seeing those different kind of concepts as being representative of the ego is quite chronological, it's linear, do this, do that. It's the coach who's going, what do I say next? Well, it's I'm in my ego because I want to, it's coming from a good place. I really want to help this person, but I'm so in it with myself, I'm worried about what to say next. Whereas Kairos is more intangible, it's quite flowy, it is very like, what's happening here? There is an ecosystem that goes on in that time and space in the session that feels almost hard to touch, hard to describe, and difficult to remember. It's just that we're in this together and something is happening, and there's a loving detachment that's present for me in those moments that feels quite real, although it also paradoxically feels very intangible. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think too, that's part of the reason why it can be so hard. Like if, talking about results, like client results or whatever, if in marketing, if you're doing that kind of thing, because it's like, well, this thing happened. I don't know how to talk about, and how could I ever even capture, what really happened in this moment, and I don't know exactly what the person took and did with that. I mean, there's ways to work with that, but I think that's part of the reason why sometimes trying to boil these things down, into succinct bullet points can be really hard, as well. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
The other thing I was thinking about in this was just so often I am telling coaches to tune out other coaches, because I think that is, and of course we're going to look to other coaches for mentorship, but I think people start lighting up their Instagram feeds with coach after coach after coach, and
Yes.
it really feeds the compare and despair. And I know when I do that, and it doesn't matter how long I've been doing this, when I do that, it does that to me too. Oh my gosh, they did that. That's so good. Is what I'm doing good enough? And so when I'm getting into that place, I think it's good to actually tune out the other coaches, or tune out the voices that are making you feel bad. And it's no knock on those people. It's just, that's not where you're at. And I think that's where you start to bring in, what else provides mentorship or inspiration. Is it, like, for me, it's teachers like Parker Palmer, or comedians, or music, or there's so many other sources of inspiration. And I think when you expand your aperture of mentorship and inspiration, that is going to make you a better coach, and it's going to make you more creative in how you express what you do and how you work with people.
I want to just highlight that and underline it 10 times.
Yeah.
Bridget, like, I just think that's so important. Neither of my mentors, my in-person mentors, are coaches. But aside from that, even let's go to the Instagram place, because we, tie it back to that first talk we had about coach fluencers. Like, I found people in completely different industries who inspired me in the way that they were showing up in those industries. So, for example, I'll give people some concrete examples. 2 people I follow on Instagram. Well, one of them isn't that active, but one of the people I follow on Instagram who I absolutely love, who inspires me in many ways, is Isabella Rossellini.
Oh yeah.
You know,
Yes. Agree.
this is this woman who follows all her creative, energies, who during the pandemic, read Darwin's book on emotions, which is actually a really good book, and turned it into a one-woman stage play, and then went and performed it. Like, and then she runs a farm, and then she's an actress, and then she sells makeup, and then she like da da da, like I on and on and on, right? She's just completely in love with her own creative expression. And she's got nothing to do with the coaching world, but she's just one of those people that when I see her on Instagram, I just feel like inspired. This, I don't, maybe there's a better word, but that's the word, right? So that's one example. And then another example, and I want to hear your examples. I'm going to give one more example, then I
Mm.
want you two to give your examples. And then the other one is a designer. So I love interior design. I love mucking about with my house and stuff. And there's a designer named Ilse Crawford who is absolutely, I love the way she approaches interior design. She's all about how do people feel in this space. She totally turned things on their head. She led a university program for years about looking at the human in the design, and she was trying to bring humanity into design. And so, like, those are the kinds of things that I find, find those people who are in completely different, fields, and then the competition stuff, or the like feeling like you have to do what they're doing, it doesn't seem to be there. Instead, it's like, oh, that's so interesting. So those are two examples for me. What examples do you guys have? I'd
Oh
love to hear
man, this
them.
is so
Go
fun.
ahead,
This is so
Sass.
fun. So I did a lot of art history in school and at uni, and I'm always seeking out artists. So I am completely obsessed with like a lot of Helma Klint's stuff, who is a incredible like abstract modern art. And she also has a really interesting story in that she felt that she was given these images, like that they actually came to her from spirit. And she's just a fascinating human. I'm really interested in her beliefs as well. Like she was kind of a little bit into the whole, I think she was connected to Steiner and what's her name? Is it Blatsky, the woman? I can't
Blavatsky,
remember.
I think it is. The
Blavatsky, yeah.
Theosophists.
The
Yeah.
Theosophist. Yeah, she was kind of into all of that, which I find really, the Rosicrucian scene is kind of fun to me. Yeah, so I really love that connection between art and inspiration, and I think just, I imagine the conversations that they might have had, and what that would have been like. I think Steiner is quite a fascinating character as well. So I've sort of have this like little side hustle where I'm just trying to absorb all of that info. And Nora Bateson is someone who's sort of floated around me for quite a while. I really love the conversations she had. She is the daughter of Gregory Bateson, who was married at one point to Margaret Mead, and her way of conceptualizing like the complexity that we live in. And she's an artist and a filmmaker and a thing. Yeah, and her latest book, Combining, is something that I'm really taking my time to read through. I just find the way she sees the world quite fascinating. It's like she doesn't follow the rules. I think Helma doesn't follow the rules either. So there's a theme in there for me about coming at life from a little bit of a left field view that really appeals. And Bridget and I share a bit of a passion and a love for UFO disclosure, right? So
Oh my God,
for me,
I'm going down the rabbit hole with you so
yeah,
hard right now.
For who? Sorry, I missed that.
for UFO disclosure,
Oh,
right?
UFO. Okay.
Yeah. And so I've been, I mean, gosh, I was 10 when ET came out. It was life-shaping for me. But I've always found the idea that we are alone in the universe to be kind of ridiculous. Like it just did not gel with me. And so one of my favorite podcasts, which I've now managed to get Bridget listening to, is called the UFO Rabbit Hole podcast. And Kelly Chase, who hosts that, she is one of the most like thoughtful, critical thinking, but really passionate about the topic. She invites like philosophers and religious studies kind of professors and people who are sort of in the scene, but it's because it's quite a blokey sort of a scene. But what I love about Kelly's podcast is what she's saying is, what is the nature of reality? Like, what do we even know? And what if what we know turns out to be unsettlingly wrong? There's something about that for me that feels quite edgy. And yeah, all of these inspirations, I think, inspire me to ask the more questions and think more laterally, and yeah, to be willing to be in that place of the happy unknown. I think that feels really kind of important to me. It's like a real lesson in, yeah, loving detachment from getting somewhere, tying anything up in a neat bow. I actually like the mess on the table in front of me. Yeah.
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 Neat. Oh, I
Same.
learned something about the two of you today.
I know, I'm just speaking of rabbit holes, like I'm just going down this rabbit hole, but I think the way you said it, Sass, really characterizes it, is I do like to think about the nature of reality. And as I think of some of the teachings that I've followed over the years, there's a lot about the nature of reality. And I had a lot of big questions, why do people suffer? Like things I was looking for answers to. And so sometimes, somebody that I resonated with just provided a piece of that answer, because some of the answers that I was hearing were not adequate. I wasn't satisfied by like the new age kind of, they're just, they're in their own movie and they've negatively manifested this experience. And I was like, that just doesn't really resonate for me. So I needed to expand beyond kind of the new age circle. I just, in the more traditional inspirational teacher sense, just as you were talking, Sass, I remember running across Pema Chodron's work years ago. And when she was in the teaching, I learned from her about the fundamental groundlessness of life. And so when we're trying to hold on and control, we humans are trying to hold on to something that's fundamentally groundless. And sort of, I think for me, that's been a big theme, because I was a big hold on and control kind of person. And so anything that sort of helped me to see the value of letting go, or like why letting go or how to let go. Parker Palmer was another big teacher for me, huge influence in my mosaic work. Michael Singer's The Untethered Soul really spoke to me in the ways that we try to sort of defend our wounds, and rather than extracting our wounds and healing. So there's these bits and pieces along the way. And then I also like to range a field, and I notice I'll just go down rabbit holes, and now I don't try to understand why too quickly. I also love the idea of just like the cosmic joke or the cosmic unfolding. And so now I'll follow a fascination, just knowing that there may be some big reveal later, maybe not. So like when I started listening to podcasts, and just different ones, and we'll just notice like, oh, I love how Smartless has 3 hosts, and then each one kicks off a week, and I'll realize that I've been gathering pieces and putting them away for something. Or I love the Handsome podcast and the way that those comedians interact together. I love Fortune Feimster, who's one of the comedians on the Hanson podcast, and her Instagram is it's just her being her, but she has these little characters that she does. Brenda, who wears turquoise, and her husband Tim, her husband Tim gives her a new piece of turquoise jewelry for, Mother's Day. So, and then it gets a little blue from there. So I'll leave it to your imaginations. But yeah, my life has gotten richer when I just stepped out of the self-help world. Like, honestly, I have my stack of self-help books that I have not cracked a self-help book in years. I don't, and I'm not, I'm not saying I never will, but it's just, I'm just seeking inspiration in other places. And so I think if you find your attention, just follow where your attention goes. I will say, I think one of the best self-help, or I wouldn't even call this a self-help book. It's a spiritual book, but another book that really changed me was Tokopah Turner's book, Belonging. Such a beautiful book. And you can tell that some people who are writing these books are really putting something special into them. And so thinking about that ecosystem, like what is coming through them into their work. And I think again, it's really good to have that ego system versus ecosystem lens so if you're thinking about who you resonate with, is somebody getting you all excited? Are they saying, I'm the one who can help? I'm the one who can fix this? Or are they saying, this is what I'm learning. This is my experience. Here's a story that I want to tell you. Storytellers, right? David White, I can't think of the other gentleman, who's Martin Shaw. Amazing storyteller, right? So those are the kinds of inspirations that I'm looking for these days.
Neat. Well, sounds like we should maybe wrap it up there too. I was thinking, the other thing I was thinking when I was thinking about this topic is like, I think if marketers are good at marketing, now you're a marketer, Bridget, and I really appreciate that about you because she came up with like 3 OG coaches talking shop. And that's so good. And I would have never in a million, I think I said, why don't we call it coaching conversations, which is like as bland as you can get. And then Bridget like found the thing that just captures like it's 3 people, it's OG coaches, and we're talking shop. It's like got it all. So marketing is super important. But I think because marketers are so good at marketing, the coaching world, coaches get distracted by spending a lot of time and attention and money on marketing. And I always think if you spend as much time on mentoring as you do marketing, you're better off. You're at least as well off, if not, like I think like if you spend a little less on, getting the photo shoot, getting the website, getting the this, that, those things are important, but you don't have to spend as much on them as you think, and put some attention onto that mentoring. Really good mentoring. And it doesn't even have to cost anything. I'm not talking about even money, I'm talking about time. So like I often recommend the book Steal Like an Artist by Austin Kleon to my clients because the title is, but he's really talking about mentoring in that book and how to be mentored by people that you don't even know, like we are talking about here right now. So yeah, I think I think we've given lots of good little streams for people to walk down.
Well, I wanted to
Anything
add,
else you guys want to say
yeah.
before we wrap up?
I do have one final thought because I think you made a really good point about marketing and mentorship and the balance. And so often what I see is coaches going to invest huge amounts in marketing or getting their website done because they think hiring this professional is going to help, this web professional or this copywriter or whatever is going to help them get this done. But what a lot of times those people can't do is help you resolve the stuff that's going on inside of you, because you can't outsource that to a professional. And so even in those cases where you're looking at marketing or whatever, I think that's another important juncture to have some mentorship so that you can work hand in hand with moving forward, getting the tasks done. But because this work is so personal and vulnerable, all the more reason to get the help you need to keep you moving forward, because it will bring your stuff up as you start to, put your banner out and express yourself in the world.
Yeah.
I think that for me is the next thing that we need to talk about. What comes up for us internally while we're putting our shingle out?
Oh,
I don't think we talk about that enough, where we try to outsource our own discomfort. Maybe that's for the next episode.
I'm making a note.
Who's doing the next episode? Okay. All right. I love it. Okay. Good stuff. So thanks for giving us your time and attention again. We're getting lots of great feedback, which is keeping us going. And
Yeah,
so we're
it's
going to just
lovely.
keep going as long as you guys keep getting something out of it. So thanks for being here today. Bye.
Bye,
Bye.
everyone.